למען ציון לא אחשה, ולמען ירושלים לא אשקוט.
You are listening to Hebrew Voices with Nehemia Gordon. Thank you for supporting Nehemia's Makor Hebrew Foundation. Learn more at nehemiaswall.com.
This is Nehemia Gordon with Hebrew Voices, and I am here at a place called Khirbet Media. A lot of people identify this as the tomb of the Maccabees. And I'm here with Amit Reem, who's an Israeli archaeologist. He works for the Israel Antiquities Authority, has a master's in archaeology. He's currently working on his PhD in archaeology. And I actually studied with him. And I have a confession, Amit. I've always was jealous of your hair.
Wow.
It's 20 years later, I have no hair, and this man was blessed with like the greatest hair like ever, and he still has it. So, shalom, Amit.
Hi, Nehemia. I'm excited to see you and your audience. And I want to share all of you with the adventure of searching for ancient Modin and elusive tomb of the Maccabean. And allow me to open with a personal story. And I'm taking you about less than 20 years. By the way, you know, Nehemia, I'm researching more than 20 years. I'm excavating. And now I'm the Jerusalem district archaeologist on behalf of the Israeli Antiquity Authority. I began my career in Jerusalem, excavated in Jerusalem, walls, fortifications, palaces. You all know ancient Jerusalem and the meaning. And I got married and I moved to the city of Modin, the modern city of Modin. The modern city of Modin is located in the middle between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. It's a modern city, but actually everybody thinks that around the modern city is the ancient city of Modin.
And what is the significance for those who don't know the city of Modin? What happened there?
So, the illustrious brother, the Maccabean brother, raised the revolt against the Greeks here in this area, in the area known as Modin. They lived here and they were buried here.
So this was the town where and we call them the Maccabees, and actually only one of the brothers was a Maccabee. That's a different story. But what we call the Maccabees, or the Hasmoneans in English, in proper English, they were a family of priests who, when the Greeks came to Modin, they were trying to force the Jews to participate in the sacrifices to Apollo and eat pig sacrifices. And guys, this is the Hanukkah story. We don't have time to tell it over right now. But we're actually at the spot where possibly we're going to find out if the brothers who participated, and their father and mother who participated in this war against the Greeks and eventually were successful in bringing independence for a time to the people of Israel, if they were actually buried right here. But anyway, somewhere in this area was the ancient town of Modin, and that's what you've been searching for years.
Yes, and I'm returning to my personal story. Yeah. And then I got married, I moved and lived in Modin. And I left Jerusalem and started to excavate in the area of Modin. And I was very bored. And I went to the manager of the Israeli Antiquity Authority and told him, listen, what you have done to me. I was excavating in the city of Jerusalem. Everybody look at me. And now you bring me to this isolated land. There is nothing here for me.
I think a lot of my listeners think archaeologist is very glamorous and exciting. It's Indiana Jones. And a lot of it is salvage excavations, right?
It
is. Okay, so tell us about that.
But the major of the work are salvage excavation. And you know,
and what's that for people?
It's agricultures, common building. We have a lot of them in Israel. Every inch in Israel is filled with antiquities from many periods, from different cultures, from different religions, and it's marvelous. But, you know, everything is minimized if you compare it to ancient Jerusalem. Nehemia, I did something smart.
Oh, what did you do?
I went to the elders, to the elders who lived here in the area of Modin. And I told them, please, I want to learn on the vicinity of Modin. Tell me the stories. Show me the antiquities. And indeed, I learned about the story of the Maccabean. I learned about the antiquities of this area. And you know what, Nehemia? I became obsessive with this area, with the quest for searching ancient Modin and the lost tomb of Maccabean.
Wow, so let me just explain something real quick to the listeners. Israel has a law, and correct me if I'm wrong here, you're the expert, I studied archaeology. You're actually an archaeologist. I just have a degree in it. So under Israeli law, from what I remember, whenever you do any kind of new construction project, you have to do an archaeological excavation. And that's what a salvage excavation is, right?
Yes.
In other words, there's some contractor who's burning money. He's dying for you to come and say there's nothing here. And it's your job to come in. And if you find something that does he pay for it?
It's never mind if
okay, it's a complicated thing. Basically,
yes.
But you're being rushed, and it's from all kinds of periods. And what you're saying is after digging in Jerusalem and you come out and you're digging, I don't know, something from some other period. Maybe it's not that important of a site. Maybe we don't know who was there. And you're living here in the area of Modin, the story where Hanukkah began, the story where the Feast of Dedication began, and where the Maccabees are buried. And one of the things that we had talked about before the interview is the passage in the book of Maccabees, which describes this monumental tomb that they built for the brothers. We'll get to that. But you had this passion, and that's what my listeners love.
Nehemia, I should interview you.
Yeah,
not otherwise.
No.
But
yeah.
Let's go for the beginning.
Yeah.
In order to search ancient Modin and the famous tomb of the Maccabean, we have a hint. We have a clue.
Yeah.
We have two ancient sources, two books, 2,000 years old, approximately. The book of the Maccabean and the book written by the famous historian Josephus Flavius.
So the first one is what we call in English 1 Maccabees.
1 Maccabees, exactly. And in both of these ancient books, we have an accurate descriptions of the tomb of the Maccabean. It was such a lavishly decorated building that people could see it from the shore, from the sea, from a long distance. It has a beautiful, big, white stones, second floor, roofed with a kind of pyramids, and all around the surrounding they were pillars. It was a royal tomb, fit for the Jewish dynasty of the Hasmonean, the Maccabean. Now, we should take these clues and search in the hills of Modin for this magnificent building. And you know what? I'm not the first. Already, the Crusaders searched for the lost tomb of the Maccabean, but they identified it near Jerusalem, not in the right place. But in the 19th century, here in the Holy Land, there was a boom of romantic archaeologists.
What is romantic archaeologists?
They were semi-archaeologists.
Like that's Indiana Jones. As opposed to you, who's a real archaeologist, who uses the guy uses ground-penetrating radar and excavation. This is real archaeology, guys.
Yeah, they were adventurers. They were espionage on behalf of the Royal British Army and etc. and etc. Their hobby was archaeology. Some of them were very, very professional. And they came to the Holy Land, those British archaeologists, those French archaeologists, those German archaeologists, and searched for the sites that are mentioned in the Bible, in the New Testament, and in the writing of Josephus Flavius. And of course, also them look for ancient Modin and the tomb of the Maccabean. And our story began in 1866. And in 1866 came a Franciscan priest. His name was Emmanuel Fournier. He came to an Arab village about Nehemia 200 meters east from where we are standing.
That's about 600 feet for the Americans.
Yes, and now it's in a Palestinian territory.
Oh, wait, we're that close to the Palestinian territory?
We are just close. It's a few meters from the border. Now,
I didn't realize. All right.
He came to this Arab village, and the name of the Arab village was El Midia. Mm-hmm. And he said, wait a minute, El Midia sounds to me very familiar to Modin, which is mentioned in the scriptures. And I found ancient Modin. The Arab village of El Midia is Modin.
And it's very common for Arab names to preserve ancient sites. And often the name is corrupted, like Yericho, which is Jericho for the Americans, is Ariha, meaning the name has been corrupted slightly, and Midia was Modin, and we don't actually know that it was called exactly Modin from what I read, right? Some people say it's maybe Mada'it.
It's maybe Modeta, but you know, you have...
So Media might not be as much of a corruption as we think, but okay, so they found this in the 1866.
And then this Franciscan priest published an article in the French gazetteer paper Le Monde And he writes, I found ancient Modin. Another scholar who lived, a European scholar, who lived in Jerusalem, his name was Karl Sandretsky.
Okay.
Read this article, and he came to the villagers and said to them, if you are Modin, then I want you to show me the famous tomb that we all search for. And this
And that's
Arab,
the tomb of the Maccabees.
yes, and these Arab villagers were very smart. Indeed, they were even businessmen. And they told him, if you want us to show you the tomb of the Maccabean, please pay us a little bit money. And he paid, and they are taking him to a site nearby, which is called in Arabic, Kubur El Yahud, which means the tomb of the Jewish.
Okay.
And they point to those tombs and said, this is what you are looking for.
The tomb of the Jews. And how far is that from where we are right now?
It's about 400 meters, 500 meters
Okay.
from where we are standing to the south.
Okay, it's about 1,500 feet to the south, maybe 1,200 feet. So that's what they showed this guy in, what, 1860s or so?
1869.
Okay.
And he said, wow, this is the tomb of the Maccabean. And he also published an article.
Mm-hmm.
But wrong. Absolutely wrong. Because, Nehemia, I will take you to this site and you will see simple tombs that we know of them, dozens, hundreds in the surrounding area. Nothing special in those tombs. It's not fit to the descriptions that Josephus tells us and the book of Maccabean tells us. And you know what? From the archaeological perspective, those tombs are tombs of pagans, of Christians from the 3rd, the 4th century AD.
And by the way, you don't mean to say that Christians are pagans, but the pagans and the Christians, they buried in similar ways in that period.
The burial customs from the archaeological perspective is very typical for pagan population and later on Christian population.
That's probably because the pagans converted to Christianity and they had the same burial. And what you're saying is a Jewish tomb from the time of the Maccabees wouldn't look like that.
No.
And there wouldn't be hundreds in the area. It would be something probably unique.
Yes, exactly. This is wrong. This is not the place.
I want to make a comment here for the listeners. We're standing here in this forest that was planted by the Jewish National Fund. You know, like when you plant a tree in Israel, these are the guys. And on one side is a tomb of an Arab sheikh. He'll talk about that, hopefully. And the other side is the site that he excavated that was also excavated in the 1800s. And 600, or what would we say, 1,500 feet to the south is this other spot. And that's how precise he is. He says, no, you're completely wrong. You're 1,500 feet off. I've got the actual spot. I mean, think about that. A lot of times when we talk about things in history, certain battles that took place in different places, we know the general area. We're standing here in the exact spot, and he's saying that, maybe I got it wrong. It's not the exact spot?
Nehemia,
Right,
till the end of the story.
Okay, I'm going to let the archaeologist talk.
We have to be very accurate.
Okay.
We are a professional. Okay? So, add to this that in the traditional site of the tomb of the Maccabean, which I spoke a minute ago, in the beginning of the 20th century, when Zionism came to the Holy Land, people searched for sites to identify it with them. And of course, the Maccabean story, myth, is wondrous to us, to the Zionists, to the Jewish people who returned to the Holy Land.
Why is the story important for those who don't know?
Because they were heroes. They defeat the Greek people. They fought for their nationality and their religions. And you know what? The Maccabean have a special and important place here in Israel.
So you'll be hearing this on Hanukkah, and you're saying this is a really important thing for Jews today around the world, but especially for Jews in Israel who are fighting for their survival. And here's a story of Jews thousands of years ago. These were Jews who stood up for their rights, stood up for their faith, and were willing to die and defend their faith and not be persecuted by these Greeks. And so this is an important story. This isn't just another tomb. This is a national symbol.
You're absolutely right, Nehemia. You're absolutely right. But from that period, in the beginning of the 20th century, all the people came to Kubur El Yahud, to these fake tombs, and started to pray, and started to celebrate, and light the candles of Hanukkah. But this is wrong. This is absolutely wrong from the perspective of archaeology.
Even though I could understand the Arabs of that village, maybe they weren't trying to deceive anybody. The name of the place in their tradition was Tomb of the Jews. And some Frenchman comes and says, show me where these Maccabees are. And
But I will ask you, Nehemia, who guarantee that indeed this is the correct and ancient name of this site and that no one invented it in order to satisfy these scholars? And you know what? Things happened in the 19th century.
Yeah.
Believe me.
so you're saying the guy comes and says, show me the tombs. And they say, give us some money. You're looking for the tombs of some Jews? This is Kubur al-Yahud, the tomb of the Jews. That could have happened.
Possibly.
So we don't know how long it was called that. We just know when the guy came to pay money, it was called that.
Yes.
And you're saying archaeologically, that can't be the spot.
Absolutely, this is not the spot. And I'm returning to our story.
Yeah.
Another scholar, adventurer, read the article of Emmanuel Fournier in the French paper Le Monde. His name is Victor Guérin. Victor Guérin is a famous traveler, and he writes 3 important books on the topography, history, and the archaeology of the Holy Land. And he came again to the village of El Media, and he said to the villagers, I'm not Karl Sandretsky. I know this land. I know your language. I want you to show me exactly where's the famous tomb. And they said to him, very interesting thing. Mm-hmm. They said to him, listen, the name of our village, El Media, is wrong. Actually, the hill opposite to our village, the name of this hill is El Media. And in this hill, you have a Sheikh tomb. And the name of the Sheikh tomb is Girbawi, El Girbawi. Okay. And near the Sheikh tomb, you have big building, which we call this in Arabic, El Ka'la. Now you have to understand. If an Arab call to a building El Ka'la, the meaning of El Ka'la is a fortress. Mm-hmm. Okay? It's mean that there is a huge, magnificent structure in this spot.
So there's a tomb of a Muslim sheikh right next to where we are. And they knew it wasn't this other spot they showed the first guy. They said, we know that there's some kind of fortress here. It's some big building. And we're standing right next to it.
Yes.
Wow.
Now,
can we go in it?
In a minute.
Okay.
Victor,
I want to get in.
I see your enthusiasm. You're absolutely right. Yeah. Now, Victor Guérin came to the Sheikh tomb, and indeed, near the Sheikh tomb, you see beautiful, large building. He hired few workers from the village, from El Media village, and he started to excavate inside the structure. And he started to see 3 tombs under these huge structures. And he is very, very excited. And he writes in his book, indeed, I found the tomb of the illustrious Maccabean. I'm very, very excited. He brings to this archaeological site very famous archaeologists and scholars, British one, who lived and worked in the Holy Land of the 19th century. And all of them came to this site and said, wow, this is a unique structure. Must be the real tomb. Victor Guérin rushed to Jerusalem, to the French consul. He wanted him to give him money to continue the excavation and to purchase this piece of land, because this piece of land is very, very important. In it is the tomb of the Maccabean.
Well, so why was it important to Christians in the 19th century?
You will get an answer. Yeah. You will get an answer in a few minutes. Okay.
Wonderful.
Now, Victor Guérin didn't manage to raise the right money, and he left the site. Another archaeologist came to here in 1874. He's a really famous archaeologist, French in origin. Charles Clément is a very accurate archaeologist, very pendant, very serious archaeologist. And he also hire workers from the village and start to excavate this structure. And inside the structure, he reached to the tombs themselves, kind of a niche in the tomb that in it you put the dead body, the corpse, or the sarcophagus. And on the floor of the niches, he finds Nehemia a mosaic.
Okay.
And on the mosaic, he finds decorations of crosses, Christian crosses.
Okay.
And he said in his report, no more Maccabean. This is the end of the story. This place is an important place, but it's time from early Christianity.
And just a quick overview, the Maccabean revolt was sometime around 167 BCE, before the Common Era, before Jesus was born. And of course, the Christian era is in the land of Israel, starting around maybe 325 or sometime after that, after the Council of Nicaea and the Roman Empire became Christian. So he's saying, look, this is from at least 500 years later. It can't be the tomb of the Maccabees. It's a Christian site.
But Charles Clermont-Ganneau is a very serious person and smart one. And he said to us, you have to understand that the Maccabean were very, very important to Christianity.
Okay.
Although there is a little bit mixed up between the story of the Maccabean warrior brothers and the story of Hannah and the 7 sons who died also in the time of the Maccabean, who died in the name of God. Never mind.
We can't never mind that. That's important. This is homework for you. I give homework to my listeners. Go and at least do an overview of 1 and 2 Maccabees. Those are 2 books that talk about the Maccabean Wars. And Hannah and her sons, I think, are maybe like a footnote there. They're barely mentioned. Then there's 3 Maccabees, which is a whole book about Hannah and her sons were horribly and viciously tortured to death, trying to get them to accept the pagan god. And I understand why the Christians in this period would have identified with the Maccabees, because that's what the Romans did to the early Christians. They tortured them. And here was a paradigm, an example back in Jewish history where somebody had done this before, this whole idea of being martyred for your faith. So you're saying that according to Ganneau or Clermont-Ganneau, maybe the Christians came here.
To summarize things, like I told you, the Maccabean have a special place in Christianity. You know what, Nehemia? Without the Maccabean warrior, we all, Jewish people and Christian people, would pray for idols.
We'd all be pagans.
We all be pagans. So we all have to pay our debt to the Maccabean.
Our debt to the Maccabeans,
Yes.
the Maccabees. And look, we could say theologically that it would have come from some other place, but it didn't. It came from the Maccabees, who defeated the Greeks and allowed Judaism to continue. And of course, Christianity 200 years later came out of that. Jesus, as he was known then, Yeshua, was born into that, and he wouldn't have been born into a Jewish family, you're saying. He would have been born into a pagan family if it weren't for the Maccabees. So even for that was important for the Christians of this period. Okay.
Exactly.
Wow.
So it's only logic to assume that early Christianity search for the tombs of the Maccabeans, find them, or create them. And this is what we found in the tomb. The adding of the mosaic with decoration of the crosses. And you know what? Again, from archaeological perspective, finding a mosaic with a cross in the burial niche is very, very unique.
Oh, so that's not a common thing at all.
It's not a common.
Okay.
We do not know it from the archaeology of Israel.
So where mosaics were typically in houses or maybe in wine presses?
Also in tombs, but finding a cross, a decoration of a cross inside the burial niche is very, very unique. Maybe, just maybe, it's an evidence that someone very, very important, very, very sanctified, is buried inside this tomb.
Now, what that can bring us to is that some Christians in the 300s thought this was the tomb of the Maccabees. Still doesn't prove. But you're saying that the mosaic could be like a secondary thing that was added later. Is that what you're suggesting?
Exactly.
Okay. And so maybe the early Christians thought this was the tomb of the Maccabees.
Maybe they came to this spot and they see some kind of a unique structure, which they identified as the tomb of the Maccabean. Maybe it was the actual spot. And maybe, it's happened in the Holy Land. Maybe they heard some story, some tradition about this hill, about this mountain, and they erected and they create. It's hard to me as an archaeologist to prove or disapprove these claims. But let's return to our story. After the revealing of this mosaic with the cross,
and we're still in the 1800s.
1874, after the excavation of Charles-le-Morganon, people left this site. All the structure, the beautiful building, which stood up above the tomb, were robbed away. All the stones were taken away to build the surrounding cities like Jaffa, like Ramle, the surrounding villages, and the site was vanished from the place of the earth.
Wow.
Nobody knew where it was.
So basically the local people came, local Arabs came, and they pillaged the stones because they see this beautiful structure. Some Frenchmen went to the trouble of exposing the stones, and they said, oh, a free building stone. I just saved $50, $100, and there's 10 of them. And you're saying that in the 1870s, he comes here and excavates, and now it's gone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
And gone and forgotten. Now, in 1985, a local guy living here in the Jewish village named Shilat, and the late archaeologist Tzvi Ilan took all the maps and the sketches of Charles-le-Morganon and located again where actually this magnificent building tomb stood. But again, it was forgotten and nobody knew where it was. Before 2 months ago, the Israeli Antiquity Authority, in a rare and unique step, decided once and for all to solve this ancient riddle.
Wow.
And we invest money. We located again with a ground-penetrating radar the location of the site, and we started to excavate. And Nehemia, let's go inside the site.
Wow. I love this. So this started out, at least for you, as your passion. I'm living in this area. I was excavating Jerusalem. There's got to be something around here too. And here we are. We're now walking into the site. There's like a little fence here, and he's helping me get over it. I think it's going to be easier for him than it is for me. Okay. So we're hopping the fence with the permission of the archaeologist. You guys are not allowed to do this. So some of it has been preserved. You're saying a lot of the stones were pillaged, but I can see here the bedrock where the stone stood.
Yes. And it's a little bit hard to understand because it was rainy now and the excavation ended 2 months ago. But you could see the base of a 4 square pillars holding the upper story of the building. Everything was built. This is the magic of archaeology, because in the writing of Charles-le-Morganon and Victor Guérin, we have the painting, the sketches, and you can see the building standing to the height of more than 5 meters with a second floor, maybe with a pyramid. And you can imagine and reconstruct everything. But what was left is only the base. And between these pillars, you have the niches of the tomb themselves. These are the niches. And inside those niches...
So basically there was a niche where they put a body or possibly some kind of a coffin, a sarcophagus maybe.
Yeah.
And these are massive piers, I guess we call them in English, that would have held up a large structure.
But let me show you something very unique.
Okay, wait, hold on. You're going to show me something unique, yeah?
In this tomb, there were some kind of ancient inscriptions and symbol. But all of them were ruined purposely in the early Islamic period because for Islam, this was a sort of pagan site.
Why would they think it was a pagan site?
So because Christianity, it's for them the wrong religious.
Okay, so for the perspective of the Muslims, in this period at least, Christianity was pagan, and they saw Christians were coming here and probably engaging in some sort of prayer and devotion in a tomb. And to the early Muslims, that was idolatry. And so they're saying they destroyed the site.
They destroyed the mosaics and the inscriptions and the symbols. And in Nehemia, if they were left, we could read who was buried here, but it didn't left. Apart, listen carefully, apart for the eastern niche. In the eastern niche was a fig tree, sacred to the Muslim. So they
an
never
actual living tree.
actual living tree.
And this is something that people may not realize. You hear about Islam being monotheist, but actually, certainly the Arab villagers of this area used to worship trees. There were sacred trees. There's all kinds of stories about the sacred trees. If you had some property, you could leave it next to the tree and no one would dare steal it.
Yeah.
Because there were all these, I guess I would call them superstitions, but they worshiped the fig tree.
You know what? As an archaeologist who walk and live in the Holy Land, you have to listen to those superstitions, to those traditions and legends. In the end, there is some core of truth in them. You have to listen and to learn them all. And you know what? Regarding this place, there is a lot of legends and traditions, like this fig tree, like a big black snake keeping on the place. When the 19th century scholars wanted to come and excavate in this place, the villagers didn't want to come because they said, this is a sacred place. There is a big black snake guarding it. There is a demon here. And you know what? For archaeologists, this is the...
There wasn't an actual snake, but the Arabs believed there was a demon, which they called a snake.
This is another layer in the story of the place. Because see how holiness transmitted from period to period, from culture to culture, from religious to religious. There is something here from ancient time.
And the way I would look at that is there's folklore. And in that folklore, it often will preserve very, very early traditions. I know when we studied together in archaeology, one of the examples I remember we learned about was Damascus Gate, which in Arabic is called Bab el-Amud, the gate of the pillar. And nobody today has any idea why it's called the pillar. And it's because Hadrian set up there a pillar for defeating the Jews. It was a great monument to celebrate. And so here's an example. They'll tell you all kinds of stories of why it's called the gate of the pillar. And they don't know, but the collective consciousness remembers through this folklore that there was once a pillar there. And so you're saying that local Arabs, believing this was a sacred spot with a jinn, what they translate usually as a demon, living on this spot, and so they were afraid to dig here, that actually indicates that maybe this was sacred to the Jews, and then it was sacred to the Christians, and then the Muslims remember that in some kind of distorted way, I guess.
Yeah. But let's return to our fig tree. Yeah, the holy fig tree.
So the fig tree was here when?
The fig tree was here. No, it was here in 19th century, in the end of the 19th century. But the fig tree guarded this niche and protected this niche. And they didn't destroy the mosaic in this niche. And when Clement Guénot excavated this niche, and when we came and re-exposed the burial chamber, let me show you what we found.
Yeah. Okay, now I'm excited. Okay. All right, so let me just describe what we have here. We've got these bags, and there's a thing. Oh! So there's a mosaic there. I'm going to take a picture of it. There's a mosaic, and I see a cross. And you're saying because of the fig tree, the Muslims didn't destroy this part of the mosaic, but there was a lot more mosaics that we don't have anymore.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But again, this is a symbol and a kind of an evidence. And I'm very careful in my saying, somebody very important and holy were commemorated here, were buried here.
So this is a big deal. The Christians in the 4th century or whenever decided to put a cross here in a burial niche. They at least believed that someone important and sacred was buried here.
Yeah. Okay. Who? This is a riddle. Now let me return to being an archaeologist.
Okay.
We didn't find in our excavation material evidence for the 2nd and 1st century BC. Again, this is the time of the Maccabean. We should expected to find ceramic, coins, and other archaeological materials from this period, from the period of the Maccabees. But we didn't find the smoking gun, the conclusive archaeological evidence which enable us to date this magnificent place perfectly to the time of the Maccabean. So there is now still a big question mark. You can say, Nehemia, that we return to square one.
Okay.
Like our predecessor.
And that's a good thing. In other words, Clermont-Ganneau came here and said, you guys are crazy. This isn't the tomb of the Maccabees. And you've gone back to square one where you're saying it could be. We haven't proven it.
It could be.
Okay.
It could be. We are still searching for the smoking gun. We have to enlarge our excavation. But I could tell you, Nehemia, this is a unique place, okay? All the names concerning to this place, all the folklore, and the building itself, you do not see it now. But if I will take you to the 19th century, it's unique. It's a royal mausoleum. It's rare. We do not know such a building. All this point, let me phrase it to be very careful, that probably, just probably, this was the place where early Christianity identified the tombs of the Maccabees.
Wow.
So the search continue.
The search continues. And I'm going to step out on a limb here. You're a professional archaeologist and you've got to be very careful and you have to deal with exactly what we've proven and what we haven't proven. And what you're saying is this could be the spot, or even probably it's the spot the early Christians believed it was. I want to read really quickly from the first book of Maccabees, and go look up also in Josephus. I'm going to post it on my website, nehemiaswell.com. You can go read this source for yourself. I want to read the description of the building where we might be standing. And we don't know for sure, but you're saying there's a good chance. I'm going to say there's a very strong probability, that's me speaking, not the archaeologist, that this is it. And then above us were these pyramids. I'm going to read it to you. It's from 1 Maccabees. It says, Simon sent and took the bones of his brother Jonathan and buried him in Modin, the city of his ancestors. All Israel bewailed him with great lamentation and mourned for him many days. And Simon built a monument over the tomb of his father and his brothers. He made it high so that it might be seen with polished stone at the front of and the back. He also erected 7 pyramids opposite one another. So on top of this building was a pyramid. And many of you listeners will say, oh, pyramids, that's something from Egypt. But we actually have a number of spots in Israel where there is something that looks like a pyramid, which actually became in Second Temple period a Jewish symbol, which they called the nephesh, the soul, that they put on top of the tomb. And you can see them, for example, in the Kidron Valley and some other places. So he built these 7 pyramids, these 7 souls to mark the spots. He also erected 7 pyramids opposite one another for his father and mother and 4 brothers. For the pyramids, he devised an elaborate setting, erecting about them great columns. And on the columns, he put suits of armor for a permanent memorial. And besides the suits of armor, he carved ships so that they could be seen by all who sail the sea. And when I read that yesterday, I said, I have no idea what that means. And you're saying they could see it from the ocean or from the Mediterranean Sea.
Yes.
Wow. How far are we from the Mediterranean approximately?
It's about approximately 20 kilometers, even less.
And we're in the hills, so it's downhill from here. And they would see it up in the hills. Wow, that's amazing. And it goes on. This is the tomb that he built in Modin. It remains to this day. And what you're saying is when the Christians came here in the 4th century, it's just possible that they came here and they saw the 7 pyramids, or something that remained at least, and they decided, okay, this is the tomb of the Maccabees, described in 1 Maccabees, described by Josephus, which they may have had access to. They probably did, because 1 Maccabees was in the Greek Christian Bible of that time. And they may have come here and said, oh, this is the spot. These were martyrs just like we were martyred, meaning the Christians. And these were Jewish martyrs. And they may have made this a sacred spot. And what you're saying is even until the 19th century, the Muslims still believe this was a sacred spot with a sacred tree. And we've seen a lot of spots like that around Israel in archaeology where there's a sacred tree that marks a biblical spot. The example that comes to mind is, is it Tel Dan, which has the tomb of a sheikh, they call him, I think it's called Sheikh al-Qadi, which is the Arabic word for judge, and the Hebrew word Dan means a judge. So again, in this folklore, in this tradition, it's been distorted. They think that Dan was a sheikh. Maybe there was a sheikh there, but he's named after the biblical Dan. And then the excavations and topography and history and historiography then confirm that this is the spot. I don't know that you can't, as an archaeologist, tell me 100% this is a spot, but I'm seeing these giant stones. This was a significant structure. I mean, this wasn't somebody's,
I could tell you to summarize one thing. Yeah. I'm excavating in the Holy Land more than 20 years. Mm-hmm. I never excavated more elusive an enigmatic site than this. And you know what? Maybe this elusiveness and riddleness is another kind of a proof to what was here in ancient times.
Wow. There you have it. Thank you so much, Amit. I'm very grateful that you came and you took me here into the site. And I got to see something I think a lot of people don't like. If you come here as a tourist, you can't see. I think what I just saw, it's hidden. You'll never find it. And don't try. This is amazing. So this could be the actual spot where the Maccabees who fought against the Greeks. And it's because of them that we can stand here today as Jews in a Jewish state, because of what they fought, the way they fought. And look, also give credit to the Christians who preserved the spot. And in some way, even to the Muslims who, through some distorted memory of what was here, they didn't quite understand. They thought it was a demon and a snake, but they knew it was a sacred spot. It had been by previous peoples. It kind of reminds me some way of the Dome of the Rock, which earlier had been a temple, possibly for Hadrian, a pagan temple. And before that, obviously, it was the second temple and the first temple. So these spots are preserved throughout history. The story changes. The story gets distorted, but the sanctity,
the memory of holiness.
The memory of holiness is preserved. That's pretty cool. And you could go to Rome and you'll find churches that today it'll be the Church of the Virgin Mary. And at one time it was the Church of the Vestal Virgins. So that memory is preserved. What you do in archaeology is you take all of this information, you take the traditions, you take the folklore, you take the historiography and the history and the descriptions of these travelers, and then you go and you dig. And when you dig, you find stuff. And what you found here was this cross, which is unusual in it. How many other tombs do you have in Israel that have a mosaic with a cross in them from this period?
This kind of cross?
Yeah.
None.
So this is the only one. This is a unique spot, guys. And the tomb of the Maccabees was unique. We don't have a lot of tombs, I think, that are described in ancient literature from this period. And the tomb of the Maccabees was so special that it got a description both in 1 Maccabees and in Josephus. And I don't know, I think this is a spot. I'm going to proclaim it. This is a spot. The archaeologist didn't say it, but Nehemia has proclaimed, and I don't know. Is it important if this is a spot? I think it is. I think it's amazing that we can read in this ancient source about these people, and then we can go and we can find the place that was built to commemorate where they were buried. I think that's amazing. Where can people find out more about this? He made me read it for my homework, this Hebrew article. It was with all these diagrams and I loved it. It was great.
The English version. In the site, you could enter the site, the internet site of the Israeli Antiquity Authority.
And we'll post a link to that article in English.
Post a link, and there you have a little bit professional article, but you have all the, if it will be in interest, you have all the background and the historiography of the research. And I hope that in the future I will publish a book and more articles about this unique place. And wait.
Is there going to be more excavation?
We hope. We are trying in the Israeli Antiquity Authority to raise some money to continue the excavation because the site is much, much larger than the 19th century explorers saw and what we excavated now. And maybe 1 meter from us, 2 meters, 10 meters, there is this smoking gun that we are searching for. Maybe in inscriptions, maybe an architectural element which will give us the clues that this was the place from the 1st century BC.
Wow. Thank you so much, Amit. Shalom.
Shalom, shalom. Thank you.
Just when I thought this program was over, Amit turns to me and he tells me something, which is amazing. It has happened to me all the time, where the best thing in the entire interview happens after the recorder's turned off. So I want to share what he told me. He showed me this, what they call the Eastern niche, or I think the British say niche. And this is the spot where they found the cross, which marks where early Christians came believing that this was the spot of the tomb of the Maccabees. And that's really right now, along with the name and a few other things, is their strongest proof that this was the spot of the tomb of the Maccabees. And so when they were first excavating, Amit told me, they started to dig and they found, before they even uncovered the cross, that this spot had served as a foxhole during Israel's War of Independence, that there was a fierce battle there, and they excavated and found bullets, and they knew from documents of the period, they actually found the archaeological remains from this fierce battle where 23 Israelis were killed. And this exact spot, the one that had the tomb of the Maccabees, this Eastern niche, which had the cross mosaic in a later period, there also had what the Muslims considered at one time to be a sacred fig tree. That's why the mosaic survived. It was protected by the fig tree. It was a fierce battle where 23 Israelis died, and their bodies were taken to the nearby Arab village of El-Midia, which is the name Modin, and their bodies were mutilated. It was a horrific event. And the really emotional part of it, I'm getting emotional, is that they found stashed in a little crevice of this Eastern niche, they found the clips that the soldier would put in his gun. He had a bunch of clips and he was firing, trying to defend the fledgling state of Israel in 1948. And he put those clips there and he never got to use them because he was killed on that exact spot. Think about this. The same spot where the Maccabees were buried, the ones who defended
the faith of Israel against the Greek persecution. On that very spot, this is really, he spent his last minutes there trying to defend the Jewish state. 3 years after the Holocaust, he's on that spot, the spot where the Maccabees were buried, and he puts his clips there. He never gets to use them. And all these years later, the archaeologists come along and they uncover this, and wow. I want to give a shout out, thank you to my friend Mark G in New York, who sponsored this episode. Thank you very much, Mark. This is a deep honor for me to go to the place where all these things happened. Even the Jews of that period, and sometime in the 160s or 50s BCE, realized the significance of what had happened. And they made this monumental tomb, and that I could go there today and realize that throughout history, there's something about this spot. Have a great Hanukkah. Happy holiday. Shalom.
You have been listening to Hebrew Voices with Nehemia Gordon. Thank you for supporting Nehemia's Makor Hebrew Foundation. Learn more at nehemiaswall.com.
Yesterday, I was filmed in one of my excavation in Jerusalem. Really important one. You should come here, under the Kishle.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Fantastic. Herod Palace and etc. and etc.
Oh, wow. You're excavating Herod's palace?
Something like this.
Wow.
And we shoot there. And actually, it's a secret. Do not tell. There was some very important crew from Great Britain filming for a very famous production in the US. After the photography with special cameras and etc., they put the camera on the floor and it was robbed and taken away. This expensive, and they should come again and film it again.
Oh, so they lost the tape.
They lost the tape.
Wow, that's, oh my, wow.